Ambassador Ryxx Novalux stood at the grand observation deck of the Galactic Federation headquarters, his four eyes reflecting the countless stars beyond. The massive structure, hovering in deep space, represented everything the Federation had achieved: technological supremacy, cultural refinement, and absolute control over known space. Well, almost absolute. Ambassador Novalux, the Council awaits your report on the primitive species of Sol 3, announced his assistant, Tella Brightwing, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with professional courtesy. Ryxx adjusted his ceremonial robes, a gesture he had practiced countless times before addressing the Council. Very well. Though I fail to see why we waste our time with such basic life forms. The Council chamber was a marvel of engineering, with walls that shifted like liquid metal and seats that hovered in perfect geometric formations. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in judgment, their combined intelligence capable of solving mathematical equations that would make quantum computers weep if they were capable of emotions, unlike these primitives from Earth. Honored Council Ryxx began, his voice carrying the perfect mix of respect and authority. I have spent 3 standard cycles observing the inhabitants of Sol 3, known to its natives as Earth. He paused, allowing his translator implant to convert his natural harmonic speech patterns into something the various Council species could understand. These humans, he continued, carefully pronouncing the word as if it left a bad taste in his mouth, have barely mastered basic space travel. Their most advanced ships still rely on chemical propulsion. Can you believe they consider reaching their own moon an achievement? A ripple of amusement passed through the Council. Supreme Counselor Zara Starweaver, her crystalline form catching the light, spoke. Yet they have applied for Federation membership. We must review all applications as per Protocol 7249B. With all due respect, Supreme Counselor Ryxx replied, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's current technological level. They still use fossil fuels. Their communication systems rely on crude electromagnetic waves, and their medical technology. He shuddered dramatically, earning several sympathetic nods from the Council members. The display showed scenes from Earth cars stuck in traffic, hospitals with traditional surgical tools, and smartphones that looked like ancient artifacts compared to Federation tech. They spend more time creating entertainment than advancing their science. Did you know they have entire industries dedicated to pretending? Elaborate, requested Counselor Nexus Prime, his cybernetic enhancements whirring with interest. They call it movies and television. They act out fictional scenarios for amusement. Hours upon hours wasted on imaginary situations instead of pursuing actual scientific advancement. Another wave of laughter rippled through the chamber. Ryxx was on a roll now, his confidence growing with each chuckle from the Council. Their defense capabilities are equally primitive. They still fight wars using projectile weapons, and their attempts at cybersecurity. He paused for dramatic effect. Well, let's just say my personal quantum calculator has more processing power than their most advanced supercomputer. And yet, interjected Counselor Aurora Flux, her energy form flickering with curiosity, they have survived numerous extinction-level events. Pure luck, Ryxx dismissed with a wave of his hand. They stumble through existence like blind Martian sandworms, somehow managing not to destroy themselves through sheer statistical improbability. The Council chambers filled with more laughter. Even Supreme Counselor Starweaver's crystalline form vibrated with amusement. My recommendation, Ryxx concluded, is to deny their application for Federation membership. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when they have at least mastered basic antimatter containment, we can reconsider. Until then, they should remain classified as a developing civilization, subject to standard non-interference protocols. The Council members nodded in agreement, their decision practically made before the formal vote. Ryxx allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Another perfectly delivered presentation. These humans would remain where they belonged in the footnotes of galactic history. Little did Ryxx know that the universe had a sense of humor all its own, and it was about to teach him and the entire Federation a lesson about underestimating these so-called primitives. 3 standard months after his presentation to the Council, Ambassador Ryxx Novalux found himself running through the pristine corridors of Federation headquarters. His usually immaculate robes fluttered behind him, drawing shocked looks from passing officials. But decorum was the last thing on his mind right now. Make way. Emergency council session, shouted Tella Brightwing, running ahead of him. Her bioluminescent patterns were flashing warning colors, deep reds and pulsing purples that reflected the gravity of the situation. The council chamber, usually a model of order and serenity, was in chaos. Holographic displays filled the air, showing real-time data streams from across Federation space. The numbers made no sense. They couldn't make sense. Because if they did... Ambassador Novalux, Supreme Counselor Starweaver's voice cut through the pandemonium. Your analysis. Ryxx stepped forward, his 4 eyes rapidly scanning the data streams. The quantum anomaly appeared 72 hours ago in the Centauri sector. At first, we thought it was a simple space-time distortion, but he swallowed hard. It's growing. And it's not following any known physical laws. Explain in simple terms, demanded Counselor Nexus Prime, his cybernetic enhancements working overtime to process the data. It's like a hole in reality itself, Ryxx said, bringing up a new holographic display. Everything it touches simply stops existing. Not destroyed, not transformed, just gone. As if it never was. The display showed the anomaly's path of destruction. 3 uninhabited systems had already vanished. The visualization projected its course directly through the heart of Federation space. Our best scientists are working on it, announced Dr. Nova Lightbringer, the Federation's leading quantum physicist. Her tentacles waved in agitation as she spoke. We've tried everything: quantum barriers, reality anchors, even experimental time dilation fields. Nothing works. The Arcturian hive mind offers its complete processing power, buzzed Representative Swarm Speaker Beta. We have already dedicated 1 trillion drone minds to calculating a solution. The Mechanoid Collective has attempted to send probes into the anomaly, reported Ambassador Unit 359X. None have returned data. They simply ceased transmission upon contact. Ryxx watched as the greatest minds in the galaxy proposed and discarded solutions. The ethereal consciousness suggested using psychic energy to stabilize space-time. The Silicon Synergy wanted to rewrite the fundamental code of the universe. The Temporal Archive proposed reaching into the past for answers. Nothing worked. At current expansion rates, Tella reported, her voice trembling, the anomaly will reach major Federation worlds in 6 standard months. Total population at risk: 800 trillion sentient beings. The chamber fell silent. 800 trillion lives. The accumulated knowledge and achievement of 100,000 years of galactic civilization, all about to be erased as if they never existed. There must be something we haven't tried, Ryxx muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He began pacing, a habit he'd picked up during his time observing humans. What about the ancient ones? Their ruins still contain technological wonders we haven't fully understood. Already attempted, Dr. Lightbringer replied. Their quantum manipulation technology barely slowed the anomaly's expansion. Hour after hour, the desperate discussion continued. Species that had been enemies for millennia now worked together, sharing their most closely guarded secrets in a desperate bid for survival. The Arcturian hive mind linked with the Mechanoid Collective, combining organic and artificial intelligence in ways never before attempted. Still nothing. Ambassador Novalux called Supreme Counselor Starweaver as the emergency session entered its 20th hour. You've spent time studying primitive civilizations. Have you encountered anything at all, that might offer a new perspective? Ryxx almost laughed at the suggestion. What could primitive species possibly offer that the combined genius of the Federation couldn't solve? His mind flickered briefly to Earth, to those humans with their crude technology and their endless entertainment. Wait, something nagged at the back of his mind. Something he'd dismissed during his observations. Something about human entertainment, about their ridiculous tendency to imagine the impossible. Council, he said slowly, hardly believing what he was about to suggest. I may have an idea, but you're not going to like it. The council chamber grew quiet again, but this time with anticipation rather than despair. There's a species, Ryxx continued, choosing his words carefully, that specializes in thinking about the impossible. A species that regularly contemplates scenarios beyond the bounds of known physics. A species that might, just might, see this problem differently than we do. You can't be serious. Dr. Lightbringer's tentacles went rigid with shock. You're talking about the humans. The same humans you recommended we deny Federation membership to. Counselor Aurora Flux flickered with disbelief. Ryxx squared his shoulders. Yes, because while we've spent millennia perfecting our understanding of how the universe works, they've spent centuries imagining how it might work differently. Their entertainment industry, which I so recently mocked, is built on finding creative solutions to impossible problems. The council erupted in protests, but Supreme Counselor Starweaver raised her crystalline hand for silence. Ambassador Novalux, are you suggesting we ask these primitives for help? Supreme Counselor, with all due respect, Ryxx replied, at this point, what do we have to lose? The silence that followed was deafening. 800 trillion lives hanging in the balance. The greatest civilization in known space facing extinction. And their last hope might lie with a species that still thought digital watches were pretty neat. The landing pad at the United Nations Space Agency headquarters in Geneva wasn't designed for Federation shuttles. Ambassador Ryxx Novalux tried to maintain his dignity as he ducked through the too small door, his ceremonial robes catching on the frame. Behind him, Dr. Nova Lightbringer's tentacles tangled momentarily with the safety harness. Primitive construction, she muttered, finally freeing herself. Remember why we're here, Ryxx whispered back. The Federation's most advanced ships were disappearing into the quantum anomaly like soap bubbles popping. Pride was a luxury they couldn't afford anymore. A small, welcoming committee waited on the landing pad. At its center stood a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple white lab coat with a name tag that read Dr. Alexandra, Blackwood Quantum Physics Division. Welcome to Earth, she said, extending her hand. Ryxx studied human customs enough to recognize the greeting gesture, though it took him a moment to remember which of his 4 arms was appropriate to use. I understand you have a rather urgent problem. That's putting it mildly, Dr. Lightbringer interjected, her tentacles waving in agitation. The very fabric of space-time is unraveling, and... Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside, Dr. Blackwood suggested, gesturing toward the building. My team is waiting in the conference room, and I'm told your species prefers a higher humidity level than our current weather provides. Ryxx blinked all 4 eyes in surprise. They had sent detailed biological requirements ahead, but he hadn't expected the humans to actually accommodate them. The conference room, when they reached it, was indeed climate-controlled to Federation standards. Around a large table sat an eclectic group of humans. Dr. Blackwood made the introductions. May I present the core team? Dr. Marcus Thompson, Theoretical Physics. Dr. Jane Sullivan, Quantum Computing. Professor Michael O'Connor, Science Fiction Literature and Film. And Tommy Chen, Video Game Designer. A what designer? Dr. Lightbringer's translator implant seemed to struggle with the term. Video games, Tommy said, grinning. You know, interactive entertainment? Virtual problem-solving scenarios. Ryxx felt his pride struggling with desperation. They were supposed to save civilization with games? Dr. Blackwood picked up a simple remote control and dimmed the lights. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the table, crude by Federation standards, but functional. We've reviewed the data you sent, she said, and we think we know why your solutions aren't working. Dr. Lightbringer's tentacles curled skeptically. We've applied the most advanced quantum theory. That's exactly the problem, interrupted Dr. Thompson. He was an older man with wild gray hair and mismatched socks. You're trying to solve this using known physics. As opposed to unknown physics, Ryxx couldn't keep the sarcasm from his voice. Precisely, Professor O'Connor leaned forward excitedly. Look, in human science fiction, we've been imagining ways around the laws of physics for centuries. Some of it is pure fantasy, but some of it led to actual breakthroughs, Dr. Sullivan finished. The quantum transistor was first imagined in a science fiction story 40 years before we figured out how to build one. Dr. Blackwood manipulated the hologram, showing the quantum anomaly from a new angle. Your scientists are trying to stop it using conventional quantum mechanics, but what if we approach it more creatively? She nodded to Tommy, who pulled out what looked like a child's toy, a handheld gaming device. In the game I'm developing, players face a similar problem. A void that erases reality, but instead of fighting it directly. They surf it, Dr. Blackwood said, like a wave. Ryxx stared at them. Surf the quantum anomaly. Think about it, Dr. Thompson said, scribbling equations on an actual paper notepad. The anomaly isn't destroying reality, it's shifting it to another phase state. If we can match that phase state, ride it instead of resist it. Impossible, Dr. Lightbringer declared. The energy requirements alone would be massive, Dr. Sullivan agreed, unless we use the anomaly's own energy against itself, like a martial art redirecting force rather than opposing it. It's like in Return of the Space Pirates IV, Professor O'Connor added, when Captain Nova uses the black hole's own gravity to power the warp drive. That's a movie, Ryxx said flatly. Yes, Dr. Blackwood smiled, but the math works. She brought up another display, this one showing a series of simulations. We've run this through every computer we have. It's theoretical, untested, and by your standards, utterly primitive, but we think it will work. The next 2 hours were a blur of explanations that seemed to violate everything Ryxx knew about physics. The humans jumped from scientific theory to movie references to video game mechanics and back again, drawing connections that should have been impossible. So Tommy said, bringing up a visual on his gaming device, if we treat the anomaly like this boss battle here. Dr. Sullivan jumped in with quantum calculations that made Dr. Lightbringer's tentacles twist in denial. Professor O'Connor cited 3 different science fiction novels that had predicted similar solutions. And Dr. Thompson's notepad was now covered in equations that somehow merged classical physics with what he called gaming logic. This is insanity, Ryxx muttered. Maybe Dr. Blackwood agreed. But sometimes insanity is exactly what we need. Your civilization perfected the possible. We specialized in the impossible. She turned to face them fully, her expression serious. Ambassador, Dr. Lightbringer, we can build this. We'll need resources, and we'll need them fast. But we can turn this theory into reality. The only question is, do you trust us enough to try? Ryxx looked at Dr. Lightbringer, whose tentacles were still twitching as she reviewed the calculations. Despite their crude presentation, the math was sound crazy, but sound. The Council will never approve this, he said slowly. They'll say it's beneath our dignity to implement a solution based on entertainment. With all due respect, Ambassador Dr. Blackwood replied, dignity won't matter much if we all cease to exist. In that moment, Ryxx remembered all the human entertainment he'd watched during his observation period. All those stories about facing impossible odds, about finding hope in desperate situations. He'd dismissed them as primitive escapism. Now he wondered if they had been preparation for exactly this moment. Dr. Blackwood, he said formally, how quickly can your team begin construction? She smiled. And for the first time, Ryxx understood why humans had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. They didn't just face impossible problems. They enjoyed them. We already started, she said, pressing a button that raised the conference room's blinds. Outside, in what had been an empty field during their landing, hundreds of workers were assembling something that looked like a cross between a quantum computer and a surfboard. Welcome to Project Reality Rider, Dr. Blackwood announced. Let's go save the universe. The next 3 months at the Geneva facility tested Ryxx's diplomatic training to its limits. Humans, he discovered, had some very peculiar working methods. What do you mean you're taking a coffee break, he demanded, watching as Dr. Thompson walked away from a critical calibration sequence. The anomaly has just consumed the Proxima system. Exactly, the physicist replied, clutching his empty mug. And if I don't get some caffeine in me, I might miss something important. Science runs on coffee, Ambassador. Dr. Lightbringer's tentacles curled in frustration. Your primitive stimulant beverages can wait until. Actually, Dr. Blackwood interrupted. He's right. Tired scientists make mistakes. Better to take 15 minutes now than spend 3 hours fixing an error later. The Federation team watched in bewilderment as the humans gathered around something called a break room. They didn't just consume their stimulants, they talked, joked, and somehow managed to solve complex problems between sips of coffee. "Did you hear about Tommy's new idea for the phase stabilizers?" Dr. Sullivan asked over her cup. "The one based on that old video game?" "Sonic something," Professor O'Connor replied. "Sonic the Hedgehog," Tommy grinned. "If we modify the quantum field to spin like Sonic does." Of course, Dr. Thompson nearly spilled his coffee. The rotational energy could cancel out the phase variance. Ryxx watched as they scribbled equations on paper napkins, solving in minutes what Federation scientists had struggled with for weeks. Perhaps there was something to this coffee ritual after all. But the cultural clashes weren't limited to work habits. The Federation's precise, methodical approach repeatedly collided with humanity's more creative methods. "You can't just duct tape a quantum harmonizer." Dr. Lightbringer's tentacles were practically tied in knots as she watched Tommy make emergency repairs. "Why not?" he asked, adding another strip of the silver tape. "It's holding the resonance frequency steady, isn't it?" Before she could respond, the readings on the monitor stabilized. The makeshift repair was actually working better than the original Federation-approved component. "This defies all known engineering principles," she muttered. "Welcome to Earth," Dr. Blackwood smiled, "where we believe anything is possible with enough duct tape and determination." The Project Reality Rider facility grew rapidly, combining Federation technology with human innovation in ways that made traditional engineers weep. The main chamber housed what Dr. Thompson called the Cosmic Surfboard, a massive quantum device that looked nothing like Federation equipment. "It's too irregular," Ryxx complained, studying the unusual curves and angles. "Federation designs follow strict geometric principles." "Yeah, that's part of the problem," Tommy explained, pulling up a simulation on his gaming device. "The anomaly doesn't follow regular patterns, so we need something that can adapt, flow with it, like a surfer reading the waves." "But your construction methods are so imprecise." "Precisely," Dr. Sullivan grinned. "We're building in flexibility. Imperfection is a feature, not a bug." Day by day, Ryxx found his certainties about superior Federation technology eroding. He watched in amazement as humans solved complex problems with simple solutions, turned weaknesses into strengths, and approached each setback with inexplicable optimism. "The primary containment field just failed," he reported during one crisis, expecting panic. Instead, Dr. Blackwood's team sprang into action with almost cheerful efficiency. Professor O'Connor recalled a similar situation from an old science fiction show. Tommy suggested a solution based on video game physics. Dr. Thompson and Dr. Sullivan quickly translated these seemingly ridiculous ideas into working solutions. "How can you be so calm?" Ryxx asked Dr. Blackwood as they watched the repairs unfold. "Because panic never solved anything," she replied. "Besides, every failure teaches us something new. We're not just building a machine here, Ambassador. We're learning to think differently about reality itself." Even Dr. Lightbringer began to adapt to human methods. Ryxx found her one day in the break room, her tentacles wrapped around a coffee mug, discussing quantum mechanics with Professor O'Connor. "So in this human story, they solved a similar problem by inverting the polarity?" she asked. "Classic Doctor Who solution," O'Connor nodded. "But you know what? Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one." The most surprising transformation was in the Federation workers themselves. Initially stiff and formal, they gradually adopted human habits. They took breaks. They made jokes. They started thinking outside their rigidly defined parameters. During one late-night session, Ryxx overheard a Federation quantum engineer humming something called Surfin' USA while adjusting field harmonics. When questioned, the engineer simply shrugged. "It helps me visualize the wave patterns." The project was changing them all. Federation precision merged with human creativity. Theoretical physics danced with video game logic. Coffee breaks became strategy sessions. Duct tape held together quantum machinery that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. As the deadline approached, Ryxx realized something extraordinary. The Federation hadn't just gained a possible solution to the anomaly. They'd gained a new way of thinking. "Dr. Blackwood," he said one evening, watching the sunset through the facility's windows, "I believe I owe your species an apology." "Oh." "When I first came to Earth, I thought your entertainment, your games, your seemingly chaotic approach to problems were signs of primitive thinking." He gestured at the massive quantum device taking shape below. "Now I understand. You were practicing for moments like this, when the impossible becomes possible, and the only way forward is to imagine something new." Dr. Blackwood smiled. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said about our species' addiction to storytelling." Before Ryxx could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Tommy's voice came over the intercom, excitement rather than fear in his tone. "A reality rider is ready for its first test. Everyone to their stations. Time to see if this crazy plan actually works." The control room of Project Reality Rider hummed with tension. Holographic displays showed the quantum anomaly approaching the test zone, a carefully evacuated sector of space near Jupiter's orbit. "Reality Rider is at full power," Tommy announced, his fingers dancing across his custom-built control panel, a modified gaming controller that had made Federation engineers faint when they first saw it. "Phase harmonic stable," Dr. Sullivan reported. "Quantum field is maintaining the pattern exactly as predicted." Dr. Blackwood stood at the central console, her silver-streaked hair illuminated by the screens surrounding her. "Ambassador, Dr. Lightbringer, final authorization." Ryxx exchanged glances with Dr. Lightbringer. The fate of 800 trillion lives rested on this moment. On a human theory, on a machine that looked like a surfboard, on an idea born from entertainment. "Authorization granted," they said in unison. "Then let's ride this wave," Dr. Blackwood smiled. "Tommy, initiate primary sequence." The massive quantum device came to life. Energy patterns that should have been impossible danced across its surface. The human team worked with practiced precision, calling out readings and adjustments like a well-rehearsed orchestra. "Anomaly contact in 10 seconds, Dr. Thompson announced. 9-8. Ryxx held his breath. Dr. Lightbringer's tentacles twisted anxiously. 3-2-1 contact. The view screens exploded with light as Reality Rider met the quantum anomaly. For one terrifying moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then Tommy whooped with joy. "We're surfing. The field is holding." "Impossible," Dr. Lightbringer whispered, watching the readings. "The anomaly, it's changing course." Like a wave being guided by an expert surfer, the quantum anomaly began to curve away from populated space. Reality Rider wasn't just surviving contact, it was steering the unstoppable force. "Phase variance nominal," Dr. Sullivan called out. "We can maintain this indefinitely." "Incoming transmission from Federation HQ," Professor O'Connor announced. "They're tracking the anomaly's new trajectory. It's heading into empty space." The control room erupted in cheers. Humans hugged each other. Federation scientists forgot their dignity and joined in the celebration. Someone Ryxx suspected Tommy started playing something called Surfin' Safari over the speakers. Dr. Blackwood turned to Ryxx, her eyes shining. "Would you like to deliver the good news to the Council, Ambassador?" 3 days later, Ryxx stood once again in the Federation Council chamber. But this time he wasn't alone. Dr. Blackwood and her team stood with him, looking slightly uncomfortable in their formal Earth attire. "Honored Council," Ryxx began, "I stand before you not just to report our success, but to propose something unprecedented." The council chamber was packed. Representatives from every Federation species had come to hear about the miracle that saved civilization. Even the Arcturian hive mind had sent a physical avatar. "The quantum anomaly has been contained, yes, but we gained something far more valuable than just a solution to one crisis. We gained a new perspective." He gestured to the human team. "These humans, whom we dismissed as primitives, showed us that progress isn't just about perfecting what we know. It's about imagining what we don't know." "Are you suggesting," Supreme Counselor Starweaver asked, "that we revise our decision regarding Earth's Federation membership?" "I'm suggesting more than that," Ryxx replied. "I'm suggesting we create a new division within the Federation. The Department of Impossible Solutions, led jointly by Federation and human scientists." The council chamber buzzed with discussion. Dr. Blackwood stepped forward. If I may, counsel at their nod, she continued. What Ambassador Novalux is proposing isn't just about solving crises. It's about combining your incredible knowledge with our capacity for imagination. Together, we could do more than just maintain civilization. We could help it grow in ways neither of us could achieve alone. Tommy couldn't resist adding, plus, we've got some really cool ideas for upgrading your quantum drives. Ever heard of something called warp speed? To everyone's surprise, Supreme Counselor Starweaver laughed. Ambassador Novalux, when you first recommended denying Earth's membership application, you said they spent too much time on entertainment instead of advancement. It seems that entertainment just saved us all. I was wrong, Ryxx admitted, and found that saying it felt right. We all were. The humans don't waste time imagining the impossible. They prepare for it. The vote was unanimous. Earth was admitted to the Federation with full honors, and the Department of Impossible Solutions was established immediately. Months later, Ryxx sat in what humans called a beach chair, watching Earth's sunset. Dr. Blackwood sat nearby, both of them holding beverages that definitely weren't Federation standard. Have you seen the latest proposals from the department, she asked. Tommy's team thinks they can adapt reality writer technology for faster-than-light travel. Something about surfing quantum probability waves. After what I've seen, Ryxx replied, I wouldn't bet against them, though I'm still not sure about using game controllers for starship navigation. Says the ambassador who I caught playing Mario Kart in the break room yesterday. Research purposes only, I assure you. They shared a laugh, watching as the stars began to appear. Somewhere up there, Federation ships were being retrofitted with human-inspired technology. Federation scientists were learning to think in new ways. And humans were eagerly absorbing thousands of years of advanced knowledge, no doubt already imagining new impossibilities to tackle. You know what the best part is, Dr. Blackwood said thoughtfully. We didn't just save reality, we changed it. Forever. Ryxx nodded, thinking of how far he'd come from that prideful ambassador who had mocked human entertainment. Indeed we did, Doctor. Indeed we did. He raised his glass in a very human gesture. To the impossible. To the impossible, she agreed. And to whatever impossible thing we decide to do next. Above them, the stars twinkled with new possibility, as if the universe itself was eager to see what this unlikely partnership would dream up next.